So I had this dream. Um, so in this dream, I was in Atlanta somewhere, and I was running around, and it was just me and my oldest son Hayden. I was holding his hand, and I was running around. I was panicked, and I couldn't figure out where to go. Couldn't figure out what to do. Should I go this way? Should I go that way? And I had this feeling of danger, and then I realized like, oh, there's riots going on. I need to figure out where to go and how to just get out of this. My whole thing was just, I just need to get out of here. Just need to get out of this. And I look around, and there's other dads and other sons. It's a dad and a son, all over around me, and they're all kind of doing the same thing. They're running around. They're trying to figure out where to go, what to do, what's going on. I'm panicked, so I'm not really paying a lot of attention. But I slowly realize like, oh man, there's a black dad and his black son. There's an Asian dad and his Asian son. And all of these different races were represented by all these dads that were running around trying to just figure out where to go. And as I'm running around, I turn and I look and I see up a hill. And at the top of the hill, I see Jesus standing there. And I think, that's probably a good place to go. And so I just run towards Jesus. Now, in different visions or experiences or dreams that I've had, I've seen Jesus a lot of different ways. Sometimes when I have had visions of Jesus, he looks much how I imagine he would look how he looked in while he was here on earth. He looks like a Jewish man wearing, the normal clothing of his day. Other times I can see him, and he looks more like this. And so as I walked up to Jesus, he was at least 10 feet tall. He was wearing these beautiful, just purple and gold robes, and they were just covered in jewels. He was just surrounded by this kind of a golden fire, and he was wearing a crown on his head. He was every bit the King Jesus that we sing to. And as I walk up, I see him standing on this hill, and he's overlooking a city. And I realize as I kind of crest up this hill that I'm looking down at the city of Atlanta. And me and these other dads kind of have all run towards Jesus and are standing around him. And I look down at the city of Atlanta, and I see this huge red thing in the middle of the city. In fact, it's taking up like 50, 60% of the city, this big red thing. And at first I can't quite see what it is, just this big red blob. And as I stop and I look, I realize and I kind of register what I'm looking at. I realize it's this massive, huge, gaping open wound. It's this big wound that's just bleeding out. And so I kind of take a moment to register. I'm like catching my breath, and I look up at Jesus and I say, "What's happening?" And he pauses for a moment. His eyes don't leave the city. He's looking at the city. And he pauses for a moment and he says, "My city is bleeding." It's hard for me to say what he said the way that he said it, because there was so much ownership and responsibility in the way that he said, "my city." It was a sense of responsibility of like a father speaking of a son that's hurt. And it reminds me of moments in my own life when I have been maybe struggling with my kids, or like how to raise them, or how to be the best dad to them. And I have these moments where the Lord reminds me, hey, they were my kids before they were your kids. And I feel like I'm able to align myself with him in a different way when I step into that reality. It was the same sort of tone of him speaking in such a way that this was my city before it was your city. And just the responsibility and ownership that he had for it. And so I'm looking down at this wound, and I'm feeling the pain in his voice. And I'm feeling the pain of looking at this, but I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm like, this thing is huge. It's this huge open wound. How can we even, I cannot even imagine anything that would help. I can't imagine anything that would make this better, that would fix this. And so I turned to him and I said, who's going to heal this? And again, with that same ownership in his voice, Jesus said, I am going to heal it. But then for the first time, he turned and he looked at me. But he looked at me and he looked at every person there at the exact same time. And he said, I'm going to send you to do it. And he wasn't saying you as in me, Blake Healy. In Southern parlance, he was saying more of a you all sort of you. And the first emotion that I felt was one of fear. Was this is so big. I have no idea even where to start. I literally had this thing pop in my mind of like, maybe I could try to start sewing it up. But even the idea of trying to even start a corner on a wound that was that big was, I didn't even know how to do it. And I'm trying in my mind in this dream to figure out what needs to happen. And so I say, how is this possible? Like, how are we going to get anything done? Like, how long is this going to take? What is this going to take? And again, he looked at me and he said, it's going to take a generation that is dedicated to a lifetime of healing. It's going to take a generation that is dedicated to a lifetime of healing. And then some words popped out of my mouth. And I didn't really think this. It's just what came out of my mouth. Again, still feeling this fear, feeling this terror. And I said, well, what if I don't? What if I can't? And then Jesus pointed at my son and said, then he will. Then he will. And I could feel the weight of the burden that I would be placing on my son and his generation. And I could feel the pain of choosing not to lighten that load in my lifetime and just pass it on to him. And so I looked at Jesus and I said, I don't know what to do. Please tell me what to do. And he said, follow me. And he took off his robe that was covered in jewels and purple and beautiful, and he set it on the side. And underneath, he had these simple carpenter's clothes. He rolled up his sleeves, and he kept his crown on his head, but he walked straight into that wound. Walked right through the blood, walked right through the pus, walked right through the pain, and walked right into the very center of this wound.